Okay, we're going to make a start. Good afternoon, good day to everyone. Welcome to ACGC's first webinar for 2023. For those that don't know me, my name is Cynthia Loren. I'm one of the founders of ACGC. You'll hopefully meet my fellow co-founder Nankunda Katangaza later on in the session. Nankunda and I and the ACGC team are thrilled to have you join us today for our session entitled Coaching Isn't Just for Athletes. A few quick housekeeping rules before our session today, and then I'll get our panelists to introduce themselves. So we will be running during the webinar a series of polls, which we invite you to participate in. The way this will work is that at certain points during the webinar, you'll see the poll flash up on your screen, and we'll just ask you to answer by selecting from the options listed. Each time a poll's run, we'll leave it just for a minute or two so that you can read and respond. They're all very easy questions, so shouldn't require much thought. We'll also then share the results of the poll so that you can see what's happening and hopefully get a better understanding of who's involved today and what their challenges are. You'll see at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A section. So we're going to leave about 10-15 minutes towards the end of this program for you to have your questions answered. I just ask that you note your questions during the session. So as they occur, please just note your questions in there, and then we'll go through at the end and put them to our panelists to address. Please feel free to state your name and your organization when you're asking the question. That will definitely help our coaches be better positioned to answer. You'll also see at the bottom of the Zoom link that there's a chat function. We ask that you use this just to communicate anything that isn't a question. So if you've got a contribution or you want to share an observation, or if you're having issues with the link or the audio, please let us know. Our community manager, Oladimeji Balogun, is online, and he will connect with you just to make sure that you're able to see and enjoy the webinar. And also, we'd really like you to use the chat function today just to say hello. Tell us who you are, perhaps share your LinkedIn details so that you can network with other people in the session. And then finally, I just want to call out a little bit on the ACGC membership. So if you've registered for this program, we're hoping that you already are a member. You would have got an email from us prompting you to do that. If you're not a member yet, then we would encourage you to do that as soon as possible. Membership is currently free. But it won't always be free. So please do take advantage of membership at the moment. Membership ensures that you have advance notice of all of our activities. We have a massive calendar this year in terms of events, both virtual and physical. And we want to make sure that you get full access to that. Also, if you're not a member, unfortunately, you won't be able to get access to this recording. So please do make sure that you're all signed up and that you are enjoying everything that ACGC has to offer you. Okay, so that's enough talking from me. At this point, I would like to invite each of our panelists to introduce themselves by telling us their name, the name of their coaching company, where they're joining us from today, and also if they can say a little bit about the role that they were doing before they began this role as a coach. So we're going to start with Mirian, and then we'll go to Morenike, and finally Olivia. So over to our panelists. Oh, you're muted, Mirian.
That's true. Thank you very much, Cynthia. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Mirian Kene Kachikwu, and my coaching company is called Unleash Academy Limited. And I'm dialing in from Lagos, Nigeria, in West Africa. And my former role before I went into Unleash Academy was as General Counsel of Seplat Energy PLC, which is an energy company by its name that's listed in Nigeria and in the UK. Thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you.
Hi, my name is Morenike Williams, and my coaching company is Revision Coaching. I'm based in Atlanta, Atlanta, Georgia in the United States. And my prior role before going full-time with my coaching company was actually in HR. I transitioned from the legal department to a senior leadership role, a divisional lead role in HR, where I was leading a team of 10 people as we partnered with the managing directors in the legal division and the risk division to drive enterprise-wide initiatives around lean, agile, and human-centered design.
Excellent. Thanks, Morenike.
Hello, everyone. My name's Olivia Omideyi. My coaching business is Resplendence Coaching. I'm based in the UK. Prior to working as a coach, I was a senior risk and compliance lawyer within one of the Magic Circle city firms in London.
Excellent. So welcome, each and every one of you panelists. I'm thrilled that you've made time. I know you're incredibly busy. I thought it was really important for us to have as our speakers and as our coaches today, people who have a legal background, those who've been actively involved in the industry. So we're really hoping that you're going to be able to share your experiences, both having experienced coaching as lawyers and now providing coaching as a service. So before we get into the weeds of this discussion, I wonder if we could get our audience to introduce themselves. So we're going to launch 2 quick polls. One just is about your role, so we ask you to make a selection of which of the questions or which of the options best describes your role. And then one is in relation to the sector that you're currently operating in. So Oladimeji, if I can get you to launch the poll, and we'll just leave that up for 60 seconds or so that people can respond. Okay, Oladimeji, I think we can probably share the results. If you can stop the poll and then share the results, that would be great. Brilliant. Panelists, can you see that? Okay. So just so that you are aware of who's in the room and who's doing what. Okay, awesome. Great stuff. Okay, so welcome everybody. I'm going to kick off with a series of questions for all of our panelists. And as I say, if you've got questions that pop up in your head during the discussion, please just pop them in the Q&A. We will definitely allocate time to attend to those. We're really keen to make sure that you get everything out of this session in terms of understanding what coaching is and how it can benefit you. So let me kick off with a question for all 3 of you. Can I get each of you to describe your experience of being coached as a lawyer? So, how did it come about and what impact did it have on you? And let's start with Olivia.
Thank you, Cynthia. So formally, I was offered and received 2 types of coaching in my career. The first was after my 3rd child. Coming back from mat leave, I was pleasantly surprised to be offered maternity coaching, post-maternity coaching. At the time, I felt I didn't really need it, but actually it ended up being very much what I needed. And then secondly, as a more senior lawyer, I was offered some coaching which focused on developing those from underrepresented backgrounds in the legal sector.
Excellent, thank you. And Morenike, can we come to you next?
Sure. So I first had an executive coach when I was actually at a Magic Circle firm based in London and was a senior attorney. And I'd requested one just as part of my own career development journey and wondering if that was an investment that they would be willing to make in me. And they completely were. It was at a time where I was trying to decide whether or not I wanted to pursue partnership or pivot to in-house practice. And so I think coaching was it was a safe space. It was a place for me to talk to someone who was just really focused on me and my goals, and they didn't really have a hidden agenda. They weren't vested whether or not I went the partnership route or if I left practicing at a law firm. And so it just felt that I could share my fears, my concerns, and brainstorm aloud and get out of my head. And so it was really, I think, a transformative experience for me that helped me to speak my truth, which was that I didn't want to be a partner. And I knew that, honestly, going in, but it created the space, and I think gave me a bit of the confidence to be willing to say that, and then to make the career adjustments necessary after I made that decision.
Yeah, awesome. And Mirian?
Well, yeah, I experienced coaching as a lawyer twice in my career. The first time was while I was still in London working for Shell International Limited. We had formed the Shell African Network. It was really when the diversity and inclusion programs were coming up. And we realized that people of African descent, whether they were Caribbean, Africans, or African Americans that came into Shell at that time, which is a massive company, felt really lost. They were in the minority and had nobody to hold their hand and point away or anything within the establishment. And so we formed group coaching and mentoring circles and got leaders from the company to lead this. So I was a member of those circles, and they were quite transformational. And I would say contributed to the courage I had to then step out of Shell at the time I did. So I carried that learning and that experience. And then when I was in Seplat, as an executive, I was a member of the leadership team. I was then given a coach, and it was a totally different experience too. And I wouldn't say it was what made me leave Seplat, but definitely it equipped me with the tools that made me determine where I wanted to go next and the things I needed to have in place to go where I needed to go. And that's brought me thus far. Both of them were transformational at the levels I was at the time.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that your experiences are all slightly different. So in Olivia's case, for example, you were offered a coach, and also Mirian and Morenike, you went looking for it. Mirian, just around your point, in terms of minorities and, sort of feeling a little bit lost. I mean, that leads me really neatly onto the next question around representation. So again, question for all of you: how important is representation when it comes to coaching? Does it matter, that you're being coached by someone who looks like you or works in the same industry as you? Are there pros and cons to that? And Morenike, if I could kick off with you.
Sure. So I think representation definitely matters. And I think that was actually the coach who when I asked to have a coach, they had a slate of coaches that they used. And I had separately met a coach who was a woman of color and who was in the financial services space. I was approaching it from the legal side. She was a former managing director at some large banks. And so there was both that industry understanding. She understood the environment, but she also understood some of the environmental things that I would be encountering, like from a microaggressions perspective, some of the nuance of the experience. And so I think that you can always learn something from anyone, and that you can have a coach who doesn't look like you. I also think that depending on what some of the things are that you want to lean into, having someone who has that kind of cultural competency, that lens and that perspective, so you don't have to educate them about what it is to be moving through this space where you are maybe the only or one of very few. I mean, you don't have to try to convince me that you may be encountering these microaggressions or that this is how something lands on you based on your experience. And so I think that has been very helpful to me personally. It helped me also to strategize differently, because it's like, yes, that is happening. And now how are we going to strategize? Whereas when I sometimes worked with people who didn't have that same competency and sensitivity and awareness, I spent a lot of time trying to convince them that what I was experiencing was true. And there was sometimes dismissiveness, like, oh, but are you sure that's what they meant? I've never experienced that. That's never happened to me. And so bringing in their own bias and lens, as opposed to really being able to receive and accept my perspective. And so I think that that's a really big pro, in my opinion, as it relates to having representation. I think that industry knowledge can be very helpful. Certainly as a lawyer, a lot of my clients are attorneys. And so I understand the dynamics of working in a law firm. I understand the dynamics of working in-house at a company. I understand moving from the business side and from the legal side to the business. And so just being able to speak to how those strategies differ, the adjustments that you need to make, has been very helpful. Again, being able to bring some of those experiences to the conversation. I don't think it's always required. Again, it just then may require of you as the coachee some of the educational gaps. Like, they may not know the lingo, they may not know some of the things, and so just being okay that you might have to explain a little bit, which is just fine. I think that can be the drawback, though, at times, is that you now have to fill in the gap because they don't have that background naturally.
Yeah. And Olivia, has that been your experience? I mean, can you talk about who you were coached by, and whether you felt represented, etc.?
Sure, and I completely agree with what's just been said. When I received the leadership coaching, which was focused on underrepresented people from minority backgrounds for the first time, it was my first time of being coached by it was a woman of color. And I agree. I don't think a great coach does not have to be from the same ethnicity background or racial background. They don't have to be from the same industry. However, it was like a light bulb moment for me, because suddenly somebody just got it. It's really important when you begin a coaching relationship that there's a chemistry. And I'm not saying you can't have chemistry with someone who doesn't look like you. I don't mean that at all. But most coaches, I'm sure it's probably the same with my fellow coaches here, would start the relationship with something like a discovery call, an introductory call, a chemistry call, because you have to have a dynamic that works. There has to be some relatability, there has to be credibility, and that's what I had. And so I found it very beneficial, because a lot didn't need to be said, it was understood.
Yeah.
And it wasn't questioned or doubted, so we could work towards solutions. Coaching is about being, it's goals oriented, solutions focused, going forward. And so we were able to get the most out of our sessions and get really laser focused to the heart of the issues much more quickly. And in terms of the industry and somebody having that industry background, again, it's just an advantage, because you understand, we've all worked in that sector, we understand how it works, we understand the quirks about the industry. It's not an industry that everybody knows about. So it just makes for a more fruitful relationship, in my view.
Yeah. Mirian, I can see you nodding furiously. Do you want to share your perspectives on it?
Yes, I would agree with Olivia and Morenike. Experienced the two sides of the coin like them. So I've experienced coaching from people who looked like me, came from the same culture, and people who didn't. And like they said, yes, the strengths that these coaches bring to the table, but the cultural aspect of it, someone that understands where you're coming from, someone who understands your environment, and the words that you use, phrases that you use, and doesn't have to ask all the time, so what do you mean by that? Or assume that they understand what you mean because you're using a word that they know. So they can be effective, but I find that when you're being coached, or when you're coaching someone who comes from a similar cultural background or representation, it's quicker to get from the point they come to coaching to the desired outcome. It's just quicker. And I've had the experience where a young lawyer who's living in the UK came to coaching to me. And when I asked the question, what brought you? he said he had two given to him by his firm, one from the United States and one from the UK. And they were very good coaches, but they didn't get him. He just felt, he said that they didn't get me. And I felt as if I was being slightly pressured to think otherwise. They didn't get what was driving him to want to go where he wanted to go. And he said, within minutes being with me, he said, you get me, you understand me.
Yeah.
That took every hurdle out of the way, and we could then start communicating. And he let his guards down and just started talking.
Yeah.
So I do agree that that could help.
Yeah, fantastic. And to be frank, this is why we've invited you all, because I think it's really important for our community to even have an awareness that there are coaches who have an understanding of the industry, but also that the cultural references, right? We don't always have these things advertised, but certainly for us as ACGC, we want to make sure that our community has access to the resources that are available. So I'm so thrilled that you guys are here. Morenike, did you want to add something?
Yeah, and just one thing I wanted to add is I've found that it's easier for, I would say coaches who are people of color to coach in the reverse. So in terms of me having coachees who are white, who don't identify as racially diverse, because at least I'll say in the States and in these spaces, having to consistently adapt and pivot, like you learn how to interact, and there's an intentionality and focus in how I navigate. So I better understand some of what their perspective is the way I can say, versus they haven't necessarily had to look at the world through my lens. I've had to learn to look at it through theirs because of the spaces in which I operate and exist. And so it's really been interesting just seeing that they're just tickled pink to have me as their coach, and there's not that same gap.
Yeah, no, great point. And actually, I want to throw out some quick fire questions to each of you individually, but if the person not answering has a view, please throw it in because we really want to learn from you. So Morenike, you've made a great point around sort of almost that reverse element. Why do you think traditionally lawyers are a bit reticent about being coached? I mean, the whole title of this is, coaching isn't just for athletes, because that is always the assumption, is that it's for other people. It's not for us as lawyers. I mean, we know it all, right? So what are some of our concerns or nervousness about pursuing coaching in your view?
I think in my view, part of it is, what does that say about me and my capabilities? I didn't see a ton of people receiving coaching. And so if they were, the only people I knew who were getting coaching were those getting it from like a remedial standpoint. There was some type of identified issue that needed to be addressed, and they brought in a coach to help lean in. And so I think early on in my professional career, I was just like, if someone offers me a coach, does that mean that I'm falling short? And so I think there's a bit of that. I think, again, just speaking from my perspective, being in the States, there's a level of ego and pride that goes into the legal community. It's been all of your hard work has gotten you to this point. And so if I say I need a coach, again, what does that say about my capability? Am I implying that there's a gap, that there's a weakness? And so I think that unfortunately there is a bit over here, just like, you need to be excellent and you should be able to do that by yourself. And the reality is that no one, even the person you view as the most excellent, is doing it by themselves. They have this squad that you just don't see and you don't have access to. And so I think it creates this false narrative. And I think time is a big piece of it as well. A lot of being an attorney, it's a lot of time. It's a very time intensive job. And this idea of self-investment isn't something that has been prioritized historically. And so the idea that I'm going to carve out time to focus on myself, I certainly initially was like, that seems a little selfish for me to focus on myself. And I had to understand that self-focus isn't selfish. So I think that a lot of lawyers, when I've spoken to them, it's been what does that say about my capabilities if I need like a coach, carving out the time to prioritize it. And then the vulnerability and transparency. Coaching is only I think as effective as your willingness to show up and do the work and be transparent about some of the difficulties that you're navigating and also some of the wins. And so letting the guard down when you're in these environments where you have to keep your guard up all the time again. And then as a person of color, I felt like my guard was doubly up, and there's the imposter syndrome. So all of these tracks and narratives that were playing in my head. And I think with a lot of my clients, they have to overcome that just to get to the point to like send me an email like, hey, I might want to talk to you. So that would be, I'd love to hear other people's thoughts, but some of the things that I would say around why I've noticed that lawyers in particular are slower sometimes to reach out for coaching, as opposed to like my executive clients who are just like, oh yeah, I want to coach because I have this thing. And there's an expectation and a culture, I think, that exists on the business side that's starting to pick up on the legal side, but is definitely lagging.
Yeah. I mean, your point around it being almost remedial or feeling like it is, I think is a really interesting one. I certainly can relate to that in terms of when I was a junior associate. I probably would, someone had come and approached me and told me I needed coaching. I probably would have taken that as meaning I'm a problem child. So, I mean, Mirian and Olivia, do you have other views on it?
Well, I do agree with Morenike. I've had that experience with different lawyers. And in addition to the ego and pride that we have as lawyers, there's also the illusion of knowledge. We are in a career where we study hard and we advise people. We're called when there's a problem and you help them sort it out. So we see ourselves more from, we are the ones, we know how to do it, we sort it out for people. And I know what I need, it's that. And so there's that illusion of knowledge that we know it. I know what to do. And so that whole idea of it being remedial also comes in because historically, a lot of corporates have brought in coaching as an intervention. So it's something to support employees who are going through a hard time or whatever it is. And so that still is there. And sometimes when partners in law firms see coaching from that perspective. So it's usually when somebody's having a bit of a problem, they say, okay, maybe we'll try that. But they then turn around and say, okay, we also have funds put to training. Sometimes they put coaching on the training. And lawyers would generally spend money on the hard training, if I could call it that. So whether it's updates or going to go and learn about financing or mergers and acquisitions. So you also have that lack of understanding of what coaching is, okay? And then finally, I find the issue of time too. You find a lot of lawyers feeling like they are on an unending treadmill path. They're going on and they're just afraid of the day that they'll be thrown off the treadmill. And so when you speak to them, they tell you, oh gosh, they have targets, they have cases, they have all these people they are managing, then they have home. And I say to them, it's actually right in the middle of that coaching comes in to equip you with the tools you need to do what you need to do. And you will then create the time, your vision is clear, things like that. But then it's still say, okay, time. So it's a bit like a chicken and egg situation.
Yeah.
I have coached lawyers who came in after the discovery session, said, I really need this. How come I didn't know that I needed it?
Yeah. I mean, Olivia, just tied to that point, are there, in your experience, are there sort of any peculiarities around coaching lawyers as against non-lawyers? I mean, I know we've talked about, and we're all lawyers, so we can speak freely, but we've talked a bit about the mindset and the ego slightly, and just the expectations that are put on us. But are there any other peculiarities that you kind of pick up when you're dealing with clients that are lawyers as against, other professional services, accountants or bankers or whatever?
It's a really interesting question. I would say, I find lawyers to be excellent candidates for coaching because these are generally professionals who have invested heavily in their academic path and their career path. They've spent years studying. It may have cost them a lot financially to get to where they have. So they are vested heavily. And then sometimes when they hit obstacles, further down the road. They need that extra support, often the support that they don't realise that they actually need. And you see a lot of different scenarios arising, and I think with lawyers particularly, because they have invested so much, sometimes when they come up against those sort of crossroads, it can be particularly difficult and such a wrench to make a move. You know, sometimes it's, you know, there's concern about family and friends. What would people say if I went from being a lawyer to being X? Because I've spent so many years investing in, and it can be so hard. And so you will find sometimes there will be lawyers who are very unhappy in their professions for a variety of reasons. Sometimes I've noticed, particularly post-pandemic, a few themes popping up again and again and again. Sometimes it's disillusionment, because when they started out, they had really big ideas about what it meant to be a lawyer and how they were going to fight for justice and all of this sort of stuff. And then they find themselves negotiating and renegotiating contract after contract after contract. And that's not what they thought they were buying into, but they don't know how to make a move. Maybe they've sort of financed themselves up to a certain level, and so they can't move because how are they going to pay for the life that they've built up over the last however many years. So there are lots of different issues that you see, but because they are such, I find, such ambitious hard workers, they are great to coach and to work and collaborate with, because coaching is about, from a coach's perspective, it's shining awareness and particularly on untapped potential and unlocking gifts and strengths and skills and boosting them to the extent that sometimes the client doesn't even know that they have or they are capable of. So they are really great because they want to take ownership for their direction, whichever direction that may be going. But as a coach, you're there to partner with them, to champion them, to help them move forward in those goals. So I do find it, I love the profession. I've given so many years to it myself. So in terms of peculiarities, I'm not really sure, but I love working with lawyers because they are great to work with because of that sort of drive they have, either to stay in the law or maybe to go somewhere else. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, that resonates so deeply with me because I definitely went through that sort of wrestling of moving from being, you know, fully fledged fee earner to going off to do other things, and didn't necessarily go down the coaching route. But to be honest, I don't think coaching was something I would have thought of at the time, which again is why we're sort of, you know, having this type of a conversation, because I think it is so important. So I love everything you've just said. Mirian, you've been in the industry for quite a while. You've worked all over the world. Super experienced. I mean, for you, what are some of the changes that you've seen in attitudes from lawyers towards coaching since you began? And also, you know, how does that differ across jurisdictions? Because I know, you know, you worked in the UK, you're now in Nigeria, you're exposed to all sorts of people in different fields. So if you could come to me on those two questions, that would be great.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. I do find, you know, lawyers don't exist in an island. They exist within a community or society. And so, for instance, in the UK, coaching is more popular. More people understand it. And when you talk about it, the reaction, some of them are similar to what we have in Nigeria, for instance, and some have already had it before. So I find that more people have been exposed to coaching in the UK than here. But at the end of the day, you, like we say, you coach the story, you don't coach the story, you coach the person. So the human being, regardless of all the developments in technology, remains the same. So whether the human being is in the US or in the UK or in Nigeria, human beings are generally the same. They're going through similar challenges. And for lawyers particularly, why I have loved working with them is we tend to be quite intellectual. We're dealing with facts and we're dealing with laws and things like that. And so quite often we don't have the time to focus on the softer side of life. And so I find that the transformation that lawyers experience can be quite dramatic. And it's so fulfilling that I have been blessed to experience it from young lawyers who are just starting out, and then senior lawyers who are maybe partners or senior associates. And the thing is that you get complaints from both sides. The younger lawyers will complain about toxicity and competition, and they complain about not being paid well and spending ungodly hours in the office. And then you get the partners complaining about the younger generation, whether it's the Z generation or whatever, and these guys, they're not resilient. They have this idea in their mind, they're coming, and within 6 months, they're thinking of going elsewhere. And in Nigeria, for instance, you're also thinking of going abroad, whether it's just to escape or to go and do a master's or a PhD, and that they are too soft, they expect you to spoon feed them and all that and all that. And so you see it coming from both sides, and you then say, oh yeah, no wonder we have a toxic environment in the firm. And when you then speak to them and equip them with the tools to understand what's going on, like Olivia said, it's like switching on the light. Then you're really giving them the tools to go underneath and look at the systems they've put in place that's bringing up the behaviors that they're complaining about. Because the tendency is to focus on the behaviors. And so you're giving feedback, whether it's positive or negative, or the sandwich of the negative sandwich in between the positives, whatever it is, your focus is still on the behavior, which often can disempower. And so it's like going around in circles. So I do find that it's easier and quicker to switch on that light when you're talking to lawyers or dealing with lawyers as clients.
Yeah.
And so now we're looking at more young lawyers, whether they're in firms or not, but working with the association here that represents lawyers to see what we can do for our young lawyers to start equipping them with those soft skills that coaching gives you, whether it's clarity of vision or an alignment with their values and their strengths, and what to do to get them to achieve their goals, the emotional intelligence, cultural, social intelligence, things like that, that they really need. But then their managers also need them.
Yeah. Fascinating, just to hear some of those perspectives. I'm going to put one more question to you all as a group, and then we're going to launch another set of polls just to read the room a bit. For those who joined us a little bit late and maybe didn't hear my introduction, we are going to have a Q&A session or section at the end of this webinar. So we do encourage you to pop your questions into the Q&A box so that we can put those to the panelists. And when we launch the polls, we really do want you to respond, because it will help our coaches just with understanding some of the pain points. The next poll is on sort of professional priorities for those that are listening in today. But before we get there, let me just ask you this question around terminology. So I mean, I'm very guilty of doing this, not using the right terms, but coaching and mentoring seem to be used interchangeably. And I'm not always sure what the difference is. So I would love to, first of all, understand from you as the experts what the differences are, and then find out whether you have a preference for one over the other. I mean, I know you are all coaches, but do you all mentor as well? How does it work? So Morenike, if I could come to you first, what's the difference between coaching and mentoring?
Sure. So what I would say about mentorship is it typically is someone who is farther behind on the path than you. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily older than you, but a sixth year, you're a first year, someone who is on a similar journey to you and is coming to you to share your experiences. So it's really, I've gotten someplace that you're looking to get, I've achieved something you're looking to achieve. This is the roadmap for how I did it. these are some of the pitfalls, and the goal and I think benefit of mentorship, or one of the benefits, is that I get to have that 20/20 hindsight benefit, because you've already done the thing I'm trying to do. I can learn from what went well and what mistakes you made and how you corrected them. And so hopefully my journey will be smoother and I will get there quicker, or at least with a little bit more ease, because you've been willing to share it. I do think it's a little bit more of, this is what I did and you should do it. So it's, to me, more of a playbook being handed, like the baton being passed, whereas coaching is really about you. And the goal is that you have most of the answers inside you. You need someone to create a space where they can help you to unearth them. They may be caked under a lot of layers. There may be limiting beliefs, imposter syndrome, all these other things at play that is clouding kind of your values, your vision, the clarity that you seek. Someone who can help create a space to refine some of those elements that I know Mirian was mentioning around EQ, like emotional intelligence, navigating difficult conversations. So it's not about me giving you the answer. It's about me supporting you and finding the answer and the goal. And it doesn't mean that that's going to look like the journey that I had, even if I went through something similar. I do think, and this is like, if you're like pure, like 100% coaching, it's technically, you only ask questions, you never really give answers. I think the reality is, we're attorneys, so we have been and navigated many of these situations. And so there is a component where someone may just ask, like, did you encounter this and what did you do? And sometimes I will share some of that, but with the caveat of like, now let's break down what were the facts that were present in my situation. Are any of those present in yours? Like, how can you take pieces of that and pull from it, but you don't need to replicate or duplicate it. So I think the goal is never for you to be emulating what my journey was. And there'll be more reserved, I guess. Coaches are going to be more reserved in sharing that, because we don't want you to do it. We want to figure out what's best for you and what is going to help to accelerate you on the path in a way that is most in alignment with your goals. And so I think it's really you're focused and figuring out like what your path should look like for you, versus here's what I did, go do the same thing. And not in a negative way. I think it's just practically a big part of mentorship is mirroring what's already been done.
Okay. Mirian and Olivia, different views, other views?
I think, well, for me, that's a perfect explanation. The coaching process is a lot more creative and thought-provoking, which really creates that space to allow the coachee to really sort of dig deep. The coach must believe in you. They believe in your capacity, your resourcefulness to maximize your own potential. They won't be directing you or instructing you or advising you on how to do it just because they've trodden a very similar path, but they're there to go alongside you. And you know, we're all professional coaches, so it's really important how we contract with our clients. So if it's a coaching relationship, it's a coaching relationship. And if, you know, during the course of that relationship, it needs to be recontracted. So there's a bit more of a mentoring aspect where I'm given permission to share. I will share, but just as Morenike says, that I wouldn't want that to be the focus, because the focus is not about me. This is about me creating space for you. And so that's really very important. And I suspect all of us probably have mentored for years, from when we became very junior lawyers to sort of much more senior lawyers, and you know, without knowing exactly what my fellow coaches do on a day-to-day basis, that's just part and parcel of what we impart and what we give. But coaching, I feel, is something very special and different. And in relation to the discussion that we had earlier about maybe some lawyers' resistance towards coaching, what you tend to find in some of these firms is that the people at the top are having coaching, even if the people sort of further down below never knew about it. So it's really, you know, if coaching's not being offered by your firm, just like you might invest in yourself to buy that really, really good handbag, because you know that that handbag is worth 10 of these other bags and it's going to last for years because of the quality of the leather or the brand name and so on. You know, you can take the opportunity to invest coaching for yourself, even if it's not being offered, even if you haven't been recognized the leadership potential yet, because it, you know, it's something that is going to unlock something that will last. Whereas if I just showed you how to do something, if I'm not there to show you, you might struggle to do it again. But if I've unlocked something in you, I've switched on a light within you, that's a resource that you can dig into again and again and again, but I'll always be there as a collaborator, as a partner and as a champion. So that's what I would add.
Yeah, excellent. Mirian, do you have a preference for one over the other, or other thoughts on what's been shared?
Well, first, mentoring, which is more of the fag. I'm sure if you ask people in a room how many have been mentored or how many have been mentors, you're probably going to get more hands up than if you ask the question in relation to coaching. So, but in my own journey, I've mentored quite a lot of people, but I found out that a lot of the mentees wanted to become mini Mirians. They really wanted you to tell them, what to do. When I got involved in coaching, I said, but how do you know that you should be like me? How do you realize that you want to go on my journey? So if I were to talk about mentoring as against coaching, mentoring, I look at it more like a relationship between the mentor and the mentee that kind of enables an informal sharing of knowledge, maybe social capital, and very pragmatic advice, telling what to do, but also the sort of psychosocial supports that you give to someone for their work, their career, their business, whatever it is. Now, for coaching, I look at it more like an alliance between the coach and the coachee, and it just creates an enabling environment that is thought-provoking, that is very creative, and is very safe. So the coachee can be vulnerable within that space. What it then does that it inspires the coachee to maximize the resourcefulness they have within themselves, to maximize their dreams, their vision, and achieve it. And then it also inspires them to initiate, facilitate, create ways to achieve the goals they've set themselves, which will lead them to the bigger picture of their life.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
where you have a relationship that is mostly one way, sometimes two way, the coaching is more of an alliance. And so when I then get mentees, they need to find out what their own vision is, what their strengths are, what their values are, what the purpose they have for being on this earth is, and have those aligned. And by the time they have that clarity and they know where they want to go, the mentoring comes in.
Yeah.
And so that's why at this academy, we offer a hybrid of coaching and mentoring.
Right.
So we use the coaching tools to help them find that clarity, determine where they want to go. And at that point, you'll find that the next question is how? So how do I then do that? And that's where the mentoring comes in.
Yeah.
All right. So
yeah,
that's really what I wanted to add.
Oh, that's great. It's great. And interesting that you've got, again, slightly different sort of approaches. One thing I love is just the passion that you all have for what you do. I mean, this is definitely making me want to reconsider doing. I've done coaching. I've been coached in the past, but I might need some more, guys. So right, I'm just going to ask our audience. We want to check that you're still there and still engaged. So we're going to launch 2 more polls, and these are questions around your professional priorities and maybe some of the challenges that you're facing at the moment. So Oladimeji, if you can launch the polls for us, we will give you a minute or 2 just to respond to that. If you don't see a response that is relevant, then please just select other, but we're hoping that we've captured most of the challenges or the professional development priorities that people have for the year ahead. Okay, we can stop that one and let's launch the second one, which is around the 3 most significant challenges that you're facing in your role. Okay, so this is the result for the first one. Interesting. Wow, so leadership and stakeholder management is actually corporate governance is the top one. And then leadership and stakeholder management. Interesting. I mean, hopefully for you as coaches, this also gives you a sense of sort of the things that people are grappling with. Great, thank you, Oladimeji. Can we launch the poll that's after that around challenges? Excellent. Once you've got sufficient responses, if we can just share the results. I'm just conscious of time. So I'm going to come to each of you. Once we've got these results, I'm going to come to each of you with one more question. And then we'll open it up to the floor to see if we've got any questions. And then I may ask you a couple more questions just at the end. Okay, so this is, again, so business planning and management skills is the top response here, access to training and capacity building, navigating internal relationships and management. I imagine that's, that's a huge one, just the ability to, the soft skills and developing those. Brilliant. Okay, we can take that down. Thank you so much for your responses. That's really, really helpful for us to see. And I'm sure for our coaches, it's really valuable to just understand what people's pressure points are. So I'm going to come to each of you just with one more question. Morenike, let's start with you. So the title of today's session is Coaching Isn't Just for Athletes. Talk to us a little bit about some of the parallels between lawyers and athletes. I mean, it's not something that we consider very often. I don't necessarily see lawyers as being akin to being sports people, but clearly there are some similarities. So what for you are the parallels?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, they're intellectually athletes. I think that that's the thing, is like when you think about an athlete who's operating physically at the top of their game, lawyers intellectually are in these environments where they're going nonstop, and it's a training ground. So I think there's the endurance component, there's the being very ambitious, driven, motivated, to an extent kind of singularly focused. It's like you're focused on, I've got to go to college, and then I'm going to go to law school, and then I'm going to do all of these things. And now it's I want to go to this level. So there's the ability to set a goal and execute on it at the highest level, which I think really parallels with what you see with top athletes. There's the conditioning, and there's the amount of time and commitment that's required to do it. I've played sports, but I don't say like I'm a soccer player or a football player, because it's not something that I stuck with from a long-term standpoint. But the amount of effort, if you're like, I'm an athlete, I'm LeBron James, or I'm whoever, like there's been a commitment. And I feel like that's what it is with lawyers as well. And so what is also true for athletes is that they have a coach. They have someone who can stand outside of the frame and share what they're doing well, but also help them to refine. There's a learning component, and I think that with lawyers, that's where the disconnect starts to happen. Because law is really an apprenticeship. You're kind of learning from what's already been done. You're referencing precedents, but certainly on the corporate transactional side, they didn't teach me in law school how to be a corporate transactional attorney. So I had to learn by doing. And so you already are getting some level of input to refine your skill set. What you may not be getting is a space where someone's standing outside of the frame, both cheering you on and also encouraging you to refine your strengths and to close gaps. And I think that is what athletes have that we as lawyers should also have, so that we're getting it along the way, as opposed to on the, I wish I would have known this 6 years ago, and now I need to close it in 2 months, versus this is a muscle I've been building over time. And so I think the endurance piece, the operating in excellence piece, the desire to be at the top of your game, but also a recognition that to do that, you need to have certain things in place and people in place who can help you lean in there.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, that we look at these sort of top athletes, and it's no surprise to us that they have you know, the person to champion and cheer and challenge. And that's what propels them to get to, you know, to be the top athlete that they are. And yet, as lawyers who, as you say, we're sort of, you know, intellectual athletes, somehow we expect to still do it on our own. You know, so that's definitely, it doesn't quite make sense, but it's definitely something that we need to sort of address, because you do, you know, there's no shame in needing that help. And actually, that's really where you unlock and derive huge value. Mirian, a really practical question for you. How does one go about finding a coach? And how do you know who is the right coach for you? You know, how do you make the choice?
Thank you for that. Well, please, may I say something about the...
Oh, sure, please do. Yeah.
Question, yes,
yeah.
Because that's one actually that touches me quite a bit. Now, you know that for a lot of us, when we don't achieve our goals, we sit back and think about, you know, what's stopping us from achieving it. Now, a lot of us don't realize that our consciousness is probably only about 2 to 4% of our brain. So whether we achieve our goals or not achieve our goals, unfortunately or fortunately, is happening in there. We say we live in homes and mansions, but we live in here. And so for athletes, though we tend to focus on their physical ability, about 96 to 98% of their success is down to what is happening in here. Because our habits of behavior, habits of belief, and our habits of thought reside in our non-conscious brain. And that takes 96 to 98% of our brain. And so usually what coaches of athletes do is train athletes on how to control their non-conscious mind using the conscious, where your desires and goals reside. Now, for us, it's not any different. Whether you are a lawyer or a doctor, a CEO, or just starting off your career, it all happens in here. And when I found that out, I became very passionate about brain-based coaching. And so quite often, it's just doing that, putting on the light about how our brain works, the non-conscious and the conscious, and the tools that you need, whether it be visualization, neural conditioning, things like that, very simple things that you can use to control your habits of belief, thought, everything, which also then takes you to your daily life choices. I bet you those athletes that win the gold in Olympics or the World Cup have been visualizing this for years. Their choices they make every day, whether it's out to run or practice or swim, that they've had to do to form those habits, and the brain releases dopamine, the pleasure chemical, and gets them to do it and they become exceptional at it.
Yeah.
And so we too then have to learn to have those daily life choices that gets our brain going and it's aligned to your strengths. And then you do the visualization. And then the coach is there cheering you on and helping you reframe your mindset from the negative to the positive, from weaknesses to strength, getting you to achieve those goals. And just keeping your eyes on the bigger picture, and anything that doesn't get you closer to that bigger picture doesn't belong in your mind. So with that, that's, for me, that's the core of the similarity between coaching an athlete and coaching a lawyer. It's the same. And so we realize that we're going to continue struggling and looking at our weaknesses and all that, and living in our conscious brain. And so that leads me to the question of how to then find a coach. That's not a very easy question, really. I think, but it starts off first with what's bringing you to coaching. I meet a lot of people and I say, okay, what sort of coaching do you do or do you want? And they say life coaching. And I say all coaching is life coaching. But underneath that, then we have our areas of expertise. So for instance, you have people who are retirement coaches, you have people who are weight loss coaches, you have people who are, for instance, I'm a transformational coach. So first you have to know what's bringing you to coaching. And then when you realize what it is, then you start looking for a coach that has that expertise. A bit like the athlete. If you're running, then you need to find a coach who will coach you for being a runner, whether it's long distance or short distance. If you're a swimmer, you're looking for a coach that understands how getting to be a global swimming champion needs to be. So start off first with that clarity. What's bringing me to coaching? And some people might say, okay, I don't know. I just know my life is all over the place. I need to do this, I'm stuck. And so that first discovery session is designed to find out whether you're really with the right person. So, and the discovery session is usually free. So if you don't know, just look around. I am a member of the International Coaching Federation. In my country, there's a branch. You can go and do a search. You can go to the International Coaching Federation and do a search, find out coaches that are near you, and then just reach out, go for the discovery session, and you can tell after about half an hour whether this is what you need or what you don't need.
Yeah.
But you really need to be careful. Like Olivia said, it's about supporting the coachee to raise their awareness and unleash their potential. If you're not careful, it might go the other way around, where they start putting their biases on you and telling you what to do. That's not what coaching is about. It's about unleashing you, helping you discover who you are, what your strengths are, what your values are, what your passions are, what your purpose is, so that you're living the life you want to live and not the life the world is telling you to live or your coach is telling you to. I hope that helps.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, great responses. Thank you for that. I like the use of the word unleash, given that is the name of your company. I mean, I imagine that's where that concept has come from. Olivia, just tied to that, I mean, so that's really practical advice on sort of where and how to find a coach. Is there an optimum amount of time that one needs to commit to coaching? Or is there even a minimum amount of time? You know, how does it work? If you're sitting here thinking, actually, yes, I now know I'm going to find a coach, how much time do I really need to invest in this? What are your thoughts?
That's an interesting question. I think you could get varied answers, but I think my short answer is it depends. And it really depends on what the coaching needs are and what the coaching goals are. I would certainly suggest more than one session. I mean, coaching can take various forms. It could be a one-to-one coaching relationship. It could be group-based coaching, and they all have their place. It might be that a coach offers a specific program over a set number of weeks or months. Maybe it could be a few months, up to 6 months. It could be longer. It could be that the client is wanting something a bit more long-term or a bit more sporadic. They're working on a very sort of focused goal. For example, they want to set about opening an office in a different country, or they have a proposal that they want to take to their senior management, and it's much more discreet. Or it might be that what they want is not so much of the traditional coaching that we've talked about, but something that's a sort of hybrid of sort of coaching, mentoring, or sort of very sort of focused career counselling, something like interviewing preparation, or they're going for partnership. And so again, that might take a slightly different form. So I think there are flexible approaches to coaching. I would say it's best for there to be a relationship. So I would suggest that it's more of a sort of one-off relationship.
Yeah. Okay. Great thoughts. Thank you. We are at the hour, and I did say we would leave some time just to get some questions. So I know one question has come through, and I definitely want to ask you all one more question, if I can. So let me read out the question that has been posed. How best can one carry out a self-needs assessment to find out if they can benefit from coaching? What are the key questions you need to ask yourself? Who wants to take that?
I can take that.
Okay.
I actually think everyone needs a coach. Honestly. Like I said, the greatest gift you can give yourself is the knowledge of self. But the difficulty with the knowledge of self is that we've been conditioned and programmed from childhood. We have so many automatic pilots, automatic habits of thought, belief, and our mindset is filled with that. And so usually you'll ask somebody, oh, what made you do that? So that's just who I am. That's how I am. And then you ask a few more questions and you find out that's actually not how they are. It's something they've developed to protect their vulnerability because of experiences they've had. All right. And so to journey along in life and to maneuver through the minefield of life, you do need somebody who's objective and who's helping to just switch on the light and help you discover really who you are. And some of those things that come automatically to you, question some of them. And then when you do realize that these are habits you've formed and you're trying to deal with the automatic negative thoughts, for instance, or the imposter syndrome, and you're struggling, you're trying to ignore it, and it's not working. A coach comes in and just asks you a few questions, and you then realize you've had it in you all this while. You know what to do. Yeah. You're the hero of your life, and you're the expert on your life. So nobody on this earth knows your life more than you do. So nobody on this earth knows your life, the solution to your challenges more than you do. All you do need is just a cheerleader, somebody to create the enabling environment for you to look at those things objectively and deal with your vulnerabilities. And what this happens is that it takes away all the obstacles that are in your way to achieving your vision. So coaching helps you do that, unearth what is underneath the water that is bringing up the life you have today. Coaching will equip you also with question thinking so that you ask the right questions of yourself, of your life, because your life today is the answer to the questions you asked yourself yesterday. So the questions you're asking yourself today will determine what your life tomorrow will be, because that's the answer.
Yeah.
Everybody needs coaching. Yeah. It's the needs assessment is to say, okay, do I need it now because I'm making a transition? Do I need it because I want to leave my paid employment and start my own business? Do I need it because I'm approaching retirement? Or do I need a spiritual coach, a spiritual director who has been there millions of years, to help you your growth spiritually? And sometimes it's just, I'm in my career, I don't seem to be doing things right. My boss doesn't understand me. I can't see a clear career path. A coach can help you with that. If you're struggling with your team, you need a coach to help you unearth some of the things happening there and to achieve what you need to achieve. Yeah, I hope that helps.
Love that answer. Everybody needs a coach. So, I mean, I was going to ask the question about, are there circumstances in which you wouldn't recommend a coach, but you've answered that question. So my last question, I mean, I've loved this conversation with all of you. Oh, sorry, Morenike, did you wanted to chip in?
So, yeah, just because on what you said, like, I 100% agree. Everyone needs a coach. I guess the flip side I'd say is, like, to your question around, like, are there circumstances when you wouldn't recommend it? Being ready for one, I think if you're not ready to be kind of pushed or stretched, having that kind of healthy challenge, if you're not in a space where you're open to growth. So I think that makes someone difficult to work with from a coaching perspective, because that's the whole goal. It's really evolution for yourself, unlocking, like we talked about, that next level of potential, recognizing the capacity and capabilities within you. And so if you're like, I'm good, I don't have any room to grow, then that may not, while you definitely need one, because we need to just even get to the point of like that is your mindset. The reality is that would be, I think, a challenging time for you to say, like, I'm going to coach now. Yeah. And so I would just offer that, because at the end of the day, it's being open to being malleable, to being open to growth, evolution, and stretch. And that's, some of the biggest benefits that you get from it. And so if you're coming in like, I don't need this, that isn't the ideal state. I think certainly from a coach's perspective, those are my least favorite clients to work with. Let's just be transparent. It's not that they don't still get the transformation, but it's a lot on them and it's a lot on me. And it's just it's less pleasant for all involved when you don't have that mindset.
Yeah, no, great point. And thank you for calling that out. Olivia, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And also, I mean, if somebody is under the care of a medical professional and they're coming to coaching, that's also a situation where we would have to handle it with extreme care, because you wouldn't want that person to receive coaching unless their medical professional has said that's permissive and that's okay. So that's really important too.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for all those thoughts. I want to ask one more question, and then we're going to launch just a final poll for the benefit of ACGC, just so that we can see what people still need going forward. But I mean, I've loved having this conversation with you, and I've learned a huge amount. I'm curious to know, now that all of you are coaches and actively involved in coaching other people, do you all still have a coach? You do? All of you? Wow, that's great. So definitely putting your money where your mouth is. That's excellent.
Yeah. One of the beauties about being in the coaching profession is that you're surrounded by coaches and you're constantly coaching each other. You're constantly learning and evolving about about yourself. You don't stop growing. You don't stop needing the coach. So yes, it's a great environment to be in.
Yeah.
Yes, and yes. I was just going to say, like, in terms of like one thing, and the reality is we talked about coaching being, it's an investment. I've never asked anyone to make an investment with me that I wasn't willing to make in myself and have made in myself multiple times over. I think the type of coach that I need has evolved over time, but I coaching is still a part. Like, I have right now someone who's coaching me in relation to social media and because that's something where I'm like, oh, that is not my portion. I've been honest, and that is not my strength. And so helping me just even to overcome the mindset, like limiting beliefs I have around leveraging social media from a business perspective, and coaching me in that space and pushing me and stretching me. And it is uncomfortable, but I'm growing and I'm evolving. So I think coaching will always be a part of my life. What that coach looks like in different seasons will vary, and what we're focusing on will vary. But I just really love it. And it's value. And again, if you have that growth mindset, and I'm like an avid learner. I always want to keep learning about myself, about the world. And so every season is going to require new tools or sharpening of existing tools. And having that as a resource is always going to be part of my approach, I think. Yeah,
love that. No, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant to hear, and really encouraging to hear that you've all got coaches. So that's homework for me. I had coaching many moons ago. Yeah, maybe I need to reach out to one or all of you for my own needs. We're going to round up our session there. I think that's been super helpful. Oladimeji, if you can just launch the final poll, and I will just explain some of the information that we've put in the chat. So this final poll is really around your engagement with ACGC. We just want to get a bit more understanding about how you connect with us, and whether you are actually involved. So if you could quickly fill that out for us, that would be super useful. What we've done is we've added the details for each of our coaches in the chat. Hopefully you've derived a huge amount of value from these fantastic women who are definitely not just, excellent coaches, but also walking the talk, right? My last question was around whether they're having coaching. They still are. So, it's clear the passion that you each have for what you do. I've definitely learned a huge amount, and I'm sure our audience has. So a huge thank you to you. We definitely encourage our community, but we've done this at the beginning of the year because we want to set you all up for success. And I definitely believe that working with a coach will facilitate that. So please do avail yourself of the support and services that are available through the companies that are represented. Connect with Morenike, Olivia, and Mirian. I'm sure they will happily have a conversation with you and point you in the right direction. You can end the poll now, Oladimeji, thank you. You can just quickly share the results and then take it off screen. As I said at the beginning, we obviously recorded this webinar. If you would like access to the recording, please do join up as a member, and we will make sure you get the content so you can hopefully refer back to it. We have a huge calendar this year. We are super busy with a number of events. So this is our first one. We have an event in Kenya coming up in March, a public procurement training academy, which will be an in-person event for those that are in Kenya or can get to Kenya. But we also have a number of virtual events coming up. So we have Sterling Miller, who is a GC in the US and also the author of 10 Things to Know. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but it's a series that he publishes, 10 Things for In-House Lawyers to Know. It's a series that's been running for about 20 years. He's going to be coming talking to us about showing the value of the legal department. He wrote a book on this very topic and gets to train around the world. So we are thrilled that he's giving us a couple of hours to come and train, come and talk to our community. If you're a member, that session is absolutely free. So again, plug for you to join us as members. We have a big session coming up with the Association of Corporate Counsel later on in the year, and we will have our conference in Kigali in Rwanda in September. So lots and lots to be engaged in. We have a monthly newsletter. We have all sorts of forums, a great team to support you. Our community manager, Oladimeji Balogun, is on screen now. He's there to work with you, support you, look after you, make sure you get what you need out of our community. So with all that said, thank you so much to all of our panelists for giving up of your time and your expertise today. We are so grateful. Thank you to everybody that's joined us. It's been great to see that people have actually stayed for the entire session. So clearly this is a session that's been really valuable. So thank you, everybody, and we wish you a wonderful weekend ahead. Thank you.